are not the U.S. government, and Russians and Ukrainians aren't their governments either. But the people who control these governments and associated ruling organizations are too cowardly and selfish to fight for territory, resources, and power.
I'm not going nowhere to fight none of these wars for these politicians. I'm not going overseas to fight. I don't know what's going on, to be honest, brother. I really don't. There's so much stuff, and I don't think nobody knows what's going on.
I'm scared of what's going to happen in Western Europe, too.
Yeah.
You know, you plan a trip, you want to go there. I want to go to Italy for 4 years. I haven't been able to make it because of the pandemic, and now this.
Yeah, distraught because she can't go on vacation now.
You know, it's like, what's going to happen there?
You should call Ukraine and ask them to apologize for the inconvenience. Go for a cruise to the Bermuda Triangle instead. I'm sure they'd be glad to pay for it.
You don't give a shit about anything, you fucking idiots. You don't care about anything. You don't care about humanity, people, who's getting bombed. You don't care about cluster bomb sales.
We do not wage wars or make policy. Governments do so in our name. Did you vote to adopt the Constitution? Did you impose and enforce segregation? Did you drop nukes, napalm, or drone bombs? Do you throw people in cages for possessing plants or imprison whistleblowers? Do you choose to enrich and empower evil corporations? But we are not the hypocritical governments that claim authority. And your indoctrinated belief that we are fuels these kinds of international conflicts, propping up these authoritarians because you bought their propaganda that they represent you.
Man, I don't like war. You know what I mean? I don't want people dying.
Welcome to Toxic Airwaves. Shout out to the Ghost of Texas who shot down 2 Twin Towers in 2001. Tonight I have Andrew Howard joining me on Spaces to discuss this mess that we're in, as well as Skeef. How you guys doing tonight? Oh, I have them muted. Okay, there we go.
Doing good. Yeah, man, doing well. I really like that intro a lot.
Thanks. Yeah, that I forgot what that chick's name is that posted that video that I used a
Carrie
lot.
Wedler.
Oh, she's fantastic. I saw her for the first time this week. So
nice. Yeah, she was really like one of the first, anarcho-capitalists that I really started watching, and she really helped me, realize what the state really is. She's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I got a good definition of the state. I wanted to start this out by reading a little Rothbard from Anatomy of the State. But yeah, I saw that video and I was like, we gotta talk about this. This has got to be the topic for tonight, at least to start. So Rothbard writes in Anatomy of the State pretty shortly into it. He says, "We must therefore emphasize that we are not the government. The government is not us. The government does not, in any accurate sense, represent the majority of people. But even if it did, even if 70% of the people decided to murder the remaining 30%, this would still be murder and would not be voluntary suicide on the part of the slaughtered minority. No organicist metaphor nor irrelevant bromide that we are all part of one another must be permitted to obscure this basic fact. If then the state is not us, if it is not the human family getting together to decide mutual problems, if it is not a lodge meeting or a country club, what is it? Briefly, the state is that organization in society which attempts to maintain a monopoly of the use of force and violence in a given territorial area." And I'll stop there.
I'm happy I own Bitcoin. I'm happy I don't have anything that's, could be shut off because of my political views or anything like that. But it's very difficult to plan for the future in an environment that is constantly changing. So, yeah. But yeah, I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to Miami coming up.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll be out there. I'm planning to be out there, I think, for sure the full week and maybe the weekend before too. So.
Nice. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the Bitcoin Jiu-Jitsu open mats they have going on. That should be fun.
Yeah. I'm not gonna do that part, but I'm planning to do that firearm course he put together in the morning. John always does really good events. He does a really good job with that stuff.
Oh, I saw that you were into ground karate, Andrew.
Ground karate. I don't know what ground karate is.
Tucson likes to talk shit.
Do you do martial arts?
I've had some experience with it. I'm a big fan of jiu-jitsu, but I've got some buddies that are super deep into it. One of them has a dojo, and I like to give him shit and call it ground karate and call him Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah, I mean, the ground is an ultimate equalizer because not very many people know how to fight on the ground. So if you can just find a way to, put your opponent on the ground, then it's a lot easier, even if they're like twice your size. So it's a lot of fun. It's like human chess.
Yes, it is a lot of fun, especially like when you actually put some time into it and you know what you're doing and you're not just getting the shit beat out of you every week.
Yeah, basically, but it requires you getting the shit beat out of you for the beginning, and if you actually want to learn, then you stick with it, and then you get better. But yeah, very humbling, kind of like Bitcoin.
I just read a little bit about Rothbard. I don't know if I had myself muted or not when that was going on. Were you guys able to hear that?
No.
Oh. Well, shit. I don't know if it went through YouTube or not, but okay. I'll just re-emphasize what it was. Technical difficulties. So I read a little bit about, how Rothbard was writing an anatomy of the state that we are not the government, and that how even if 70% of the population voted to murder 30% of the population, that would not be voluntary suicide, and that the state ultimately is a monopoly on violence and is not, a friendly get-together to decide what we should do about things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing Kerry talks about a lot as well. Like, what is this we thing that we always say? Like they attacked us, we went to war with them. It's very tribalistic, and it starts, from when you're a kid in school. Governments. We all agree government's a religion, and they start you when you're very young, and your mind is very, it's like a sponge, and doing the pledge of allegiance every morning, and being told that you're a citizen and making you feel like you're a part of this thing. I think that's kind of how they get us sucked into this like mental prison of statism.
Yeah. I mean, I think what the public education system is it's just a constant, consistent beatdown of people's self-esteem and individuality, shaping and molding them into being a cog in a wheel of this state. And I think when people have very little self-esteem, they turn to things like, some politician, and like this is why people buy into the great man theory. But yeah, I was driving down the road the other day and saw a bunch of people protesting on the side of the street with Trump signs, and it made me chuckle a little bit.
You notice like the brand of tolerance that gets used is tolerance of only things that are not, counter to everyone being sort of this like status collective. And so it's like, you want a bunch of different religions, that's not, a bunch of different sexual orientations, that's not blah, blah, it's like all the stuff that doesn't threaten their power at all. They love diversity, they love tolerance, they love all that stuff. But once you get into ideas that actually threaten your power, then the tolerance goes away, and some people realize how much of a farce it is.
Yeah. On that topic, it's really crazy seeing people that are anti-homeschooling.
I think that's definitely dying like narrative for sure. Even to normies that I know. I mean, they're like, if you were to bring up the idea of homeschooling a couple of years ago, it's like the general FUD of homeschooling. Like your kid's not going to be able to socialize or anything like that. But my God, I can't imagine, having a kid and having them go to school, go to this place where they're closed off, from the rest of the real world, and they have the government giving them a quote education. And I was thinking about this earlier today, actually, because I was driving by the school with all these poor kids in their uniforms and in their masks. And it's like the exact same mentality as the military. Like with the uniform thing, especially, it's like, why do they, total destruction of individuality, of self-expression, and it gets kids, and uniforms in general get people to think more as a group. I think is a really big part of it. So I saw a great meme by Flint Crusader earlier. I think it was like yesterday, but the meme basically showed a kid raising his hand, and it said you have to ask the government for permission to take a piss. So it's no surprise that you grew up as a statist, But it's just totally insane how much control we just relinquish, our children to in the hands of the state.
Yeah, it's wild. It's at this point, I think this has been one of the big white pills, just seeing the amount of people that are homeschooling these days. It is incredibly exciting to see people pulling their kids out of state-run or communist training camps, or whatever you call them, Steve.
And that people are realizing it's not binary. It's not like, if I like, basically people are coming up with a bunch of different models, because it's to the point now where it's like, 6 or 7 families can get together and put together a co-op, and most of the parents can still work if they need. I don't know. Like ideally, you can devote the time to it full time, but it's like there's so many models that are developing basically, and there's the excuses to keep them in these Soviet training camps are becoming less and less, in my opinion, which is nice.
Could I ask you a quick question about that, Steve?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm curious. So, and I don't know what state you're in. I don't know if you want to dox yourself on what state.
Yeah, I tell everybody I'm in Arizona. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. So, but you still have to have your kid take like some yearly test or something like that, right? Or is that...
Not here. To be honest with you, I haven't even looked into it. Because it's like where we were before, the state had more rules, and like you were supposed to like register and do all this kind of stuff in the Pacific Northwest, and you're supposed to register and all that kind of stuff. And we started looking into it, and then said, wait, if we just don't file anything, what happens? And realized the answer was nothing happened. And so, yeah, my recommendation is no government paperwork of any kind as the default on anything children related. And so, yeah, so like there's no, it's like if they did have to, both my kids, doing 90 minutes a day of schoolwork on a busy day are years ahead of kids their age, like at local private schools, let alone public schools. And I don't know. It's just, and it's not because they're baby geniuses or, their mom and I are amazing teachers. Like, it's just, it's just such a much more conducive environment to kids thriving, of them being at home where they're comfortable, surrounded by people that love them, as opposed to this like foreign structure, which even if let's say it's an elite private school, you're still not around people who genuinely, deeply love you like family do. And it's like, you think about what does a kid need more, unconditional love or, a teacher with a PhD from Harvard? It's not hard.
That's so true. Yeah. Nobody's going to care about your child's education more than you, or at least that should be the case if you're a parent who gives a shit about his kid.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But that's an interesting point, just to respond quickly on that. As far as the filing, the same as according to the IRS, they convict they convict more people per year who file taxes versus those who do not file taxes. Another interesting thing on that.
That is interesting.
Come and take it is applies to more than guns.
Yeah. I was actually born as a no KYC kid for the first 3 years of my life. Didn't have a certificate. Yeah. So
yeah, I unfortunately mine have social security numbers because I was nowhere near sufficiently red or orange pilled when they were born. But future ones will not.
Yeah, I just wonder how difficult that is going to be though when it comes to just travel and showing your ID at certain places, and I don't know. I don't know if that's actually feasible. I've met a bunch of homeschool kids who like grew up in freedom families, but I've never met somebody that's like actually made it through life growing up as a kid without social security or anything like that.
Yeah, my 2 cents is getting a birth certificate but not a social security number is like the way to go, because you can get the kid a passport, you can leave the country, all that kind of stuff with a birth certificate. You don't need a social security number for that. And so that I talk to people who they won't even do a birth certificate, and I totally respect that. But it seems like birth certificate but no social security number at this time feels like a reasonable compromise to me. But yeah,
it's just such a crazy concept. Like, here you go, you're with a woman, hopefully that you love, and you two have a baby. You have this beautiful new human being that you're going to teach how to live in this world, and like you just love this new person so much, and then the government is like, we need to register your kid. We're going to give him some random, number. Like, he has to pay taxes, all this stuff. It's just totally crazy how they assert ownership over your, child.
Yeah. I've told a few people, if my kids ever file a tax return at any point in their entire life, I'll consider that a personal failure on my part. Like, I think that will be done by the time they're adults.
That was a mic drop moment right there.
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, and this is what's so funny is like these aren't that radical concepts, but very few people, like, I remember hearing things like this for the first time and just being dumbfounded. Like, I never thought that was a possibility to have conversations like this. So, Andrew, you spent some time in the military.
Yeah, I couldn't hear anything after that. Was that basically just talk about the military?
Well, yeah. What kind of led you to joining the military and then becoming an anarcho-capitalist afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, so for me and a lot of people, there's many different reasons why. Like, most common reason is propaganda, of course. The U.S. government loves putting out propaganda everywhere. School, TVs, music, culture, all that. So I grew up, looking at the military, thinking that was just like, there's no way I wasn't going to live my life without joining the military. And nearly every man in my family has been in the military. So that was another factor, just kind of a, familial aspect to it as well. I hated school. I hated school. I hated it so much. I hated having to go, to a room and having another person tell me what I should read. And, so I didn't want to be in college after high school. I was just going insane in high school. Right. And I wanted a challenge. I wanted something difficult. I was a little bit psychotic. Well, I was kind of psychotic at the time. And you don't join the Marine Corps and want to, hold a gun on behalf of the U.S. government, if you're like really thinking coherently, I think, so yeah, I mean, a lot of compounding factors. I had a lot of fun experiences. I met a lot of really interesting people. Bitcoiner veterans is like, I love Bitcoiner veterans because that's a like niche group of people that I really relate to, that really get what's happening from that kind of angle. But yeah, I mean, that's basically what drove me to be in the military. I mean, there are definitely a lot of fun times. I mean, I won't lie. It's you get some pretty crazy experiences that you wouldn't have in any other route in life.
Yeah. So you joined the military, got bought in with all the propaganda that I think a lot of us, felt attracted towards. I remember, watching We Are Soldiers and, or We Were Soldiers and Saving Private Ryan, all these, videos of people going and fighting and dying for a cause greater than themselves, and, being very drawn to that, kind of propaganda essentially. But what led you to anarcho-capitalism after leaving the military?
Yeah, so I started watching a bunch of, well, I should rewind. My brother, who was also in the military, he was in the Air Force for over 10 years. My brother was a Ron Paul supporter back in like 2008 when, I was like 11 years old. And so I grew up hearing my brother kind of throw these ideas out there from somebody's perspective who's in the military, because Ron Paul, you guys know this, but, Ron Paul got the most amount of support from the military when he was running for president than any other candidate combined. And, so I kind of had that angle. And I also started watching a guy on YouTube named Adam Kokesh, who you may be familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
He was like a really big anti-war, like Iraq war veteran, Marine veteran. And he totally got what's going on. I mean, he was the guy that really, through just watching his content, really helped me realize that taxation is theft. The government, there's no real thing that is the government. It's just a group of people. They have, no human being has more rights than anybody else, right? That includes politicians. So it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter if they have a red, white, and blue flag in the background. It doesn't matter if they sign fancy papers. It doesn't matter if they, wear some kind of robe and a weird fucking white beard or anything like that. They're just people just like us, and they have no right whatsoever to tell us what we can and cannot do, as long as we're not hurting anybody else. That's a violation of free will, and free will is, many different names for it, right? But it's something we, if you don't have free will, you don't have morality. Anyway, it's kind of a rant there, but that's kind of how I got seriously interested in the libertarian school of thought, and a combination of that and putting on a military uniform every single day after, like every time I got my paycheck, I remember thinking like, wow, this money is literally stolen from other people. And that's something that really did not sit well with me, knowing that my income was dependent on violating a moral code, Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I came from. I mean, many other reasons to not support the military either. That doesn't mean, you shouldn't support self-defense. You shouldn't support even national defense, because there is an importance to that. But there's just a huge difference between, what you define as national defense. Because having a standing army with a bunch of naive, robotic, young people, having that with just one guy who basically can tell them to go wherever and shoot whoever, and they're told to do it without question, right? Like that, there are going to be issues with that system, and people think that that's the only way to have national defense, the standing army. But you have people like Thomas Jefferson who advocated for the opposite, which is, why in the Second Amendment, everybody talks about the right to bear arms, but the other part of that is to have a well-armed militia. And that's entirely different from a standing army. And that's entirely, that's much more efficient than a standing army in terms of defense. And one thing that a few examples to put a cap on it that I refer to when I say that is, okay, take the United States military versus, Vietnamese farmers, pretty much, or what about the Middle East? Like, you have the world's strongest military superpower could not win wars against people who were fighting on their own turf, pretty much. So yeah, end rant.
Absolutely. Yeah, I put a tweet in this space just for that reason. Like, basically, like I like to pair the most dangerous superstition with by Larkin Rose with like teaching somebody about Bitcoin, like for that reason. Like I want people to primarily understand Bitcoin as an anarchist freedom technology. It's like I don't go to, the investment case, all that kind of stuff typically. Like that's how and another thing is like I try to specifically frame it in a way that's repulsive to people who are statists and to people, if somebody's, totally on board with all this stuff and driving for World War III and they, approve of my description of Bitcoin, like I consider that a failure on my part. Like I want it to be repulsive to these people. Like I want them to, buy in at 50 million or whatever, like these, I don't know, these people.
XRP is the coin for statists. If you're a statist, go buy XRP right now.
Yeah, that's the other one. XRP, it's Bitcoin without the climate and racial justice issues. So much better.
100%. Yeah.
Sorry, is it okay if I say something?
Sure.
For sure.
Hey, cool. I just found this Spaces and really glad I did because I saw Andrew on another podcast on YouTube a while ago, and that's how I was introduced to you, Andrew. Nice to meet you here in Spaces. I'm new to Twitter Spaces, and I'm realizing how amazing of a community for Bitcoiners and just honestly for all people it is, and kind of starting to kind of go to all these different spaces and just talk to people. And the question I always ask them is like, do you believe in centralization or decentralization? And that kind of starts the conversation and then seems to be working so far. I've already orange pilled a few boomers, and especially now, like a lot of Canadian groups are popping up. I'm noticing a lot of Canadians who really like are curious about Bitcoin and they just have no idea how to get into it. So do you guys have any like suggestions on like what someone like me who's like trying to make it his like mission to just kind of like help as many people like learn about Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. And nice to meet you. So the biggest factor in this is like who you are talking to. So if I'm talking to a family office, I'm going to mention, the fact that Fidelity has been involved in Bitcoin for several years now, and a company with trillions of dollars of assets under management is saying it's more risky to not own Bitcoin than to own it. Stuff like that, where you can kind of present an appeal to authority, I think is powerful from the investment perspective. If you're talking with a Canadian, then the conversation's a lot easier because they're seeing people get their bank accounts shut off by the government, which is just something you would not expect to have to happen in Canada. And like at that point, it's so easy. Like I feel like Bitcoin, as time goes on, the selling aspect of Bitcoin, like selling the idea to people, is just going to get so much easier because governments are really going for broke right now. So that's the biggest thing, is just, consider who you're talking to. And then another kind of high level point to end on that is use the Socratic method. So, if you're really passionate about something, it's easy to just want to talk and talk and talk about it. But if you're coming from a place of trying to help them discover the truth, asking open-ended questions is a good kind of gauge to get their insight on things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What's it called? The Socratic method?
Yeah, Socratic method.
That's so interesting because it's funny because that's what my wife mentioned. She was like, you're super passionate about it and I get it, but you got to just cool it down. Like, you can't push it down people's throat. They're not going to get it. They're going to think you're in a cult.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but they got to understand.
I know. Yeah. No, I think we've all been there. It's just like, it's such an exciting thing that's so clearly the answer for so many problems. But
exactly. Yeah. Like personally, like I'm going into all these different groups, like all these different spaces, and just even in the real world, like walking around, talking to people all the time, meeting new people, and all these problems, and like everyone seems to have like the desire to fix the world, right? Like everyone's talking about like, hey, how do we fix this? Like, oh, like some people are super in the dumps about it, like I was a couple years ago before I learned this, but like everyone just is like, I think everyone just wants the same thing, So it's like just helping them kind of find the solution that is Bitcoin, It like really, if we fix the money, we fix the world. I really believe that.
And there's the framework that I think is super helpful. And this I originally learned for, I don't know, like I did work in the past for like a lot of negotiation and things like that. And so I originally learned it as a tactic for that. But like, if you're talking to somebody, like establish something that you both completely agree on. So like one example is if I'm not personally an atheist, but like, let's say I'm talking to somebody who's an atheist about Bitcoin. The angle I'm going to take is, it's like, so how we separated religion and the state, a couple of hundred years ago. Like today, the idea that, the state tells you where to worship or who to donate money to or which Catholic church go, like all that just seems completely retarded, as it should. And it's like, that's a completely ridiculous idea. And then it's like, tie that to, okay, now we're trying to do the same thing with money. We're separating money from the state. And it's like, people are going to look back on the idea that, money was run by the state. That's going to seem so much dumber than going to your local politician to figure out how to get to heaven or something like that. So anyway, that just like, it's an obvious. No atheist is going to be like, no, actually, it was a bad idea to think. I would imagine, but
yeah, no, it's exactly. You're absolutely right. And like what I say is, I like everyone seems to like already be kind of like thinking big picture, right? And like, so I'm just always like, I started asking recently, like, hey, do you believe like that centralization is okay? And like some people like answer, like I had this one guy today. He's like all like for. He's trying to say like how we need governments and we need regulation. And I'm like, okay, but do you not see like what's going on? Like, can't you see that these are the governments and like the more you centralize these systems, the more room for fault, And like, yeah, I don't get that guy maybe, right? But then everyone else in the room that disagrees with him, I totally got because like they understood. They were like, yeah, holy crap, like I can't believe this guy thinks this way. And like we totally disagree with him. So, like, what does this other guy have to say? What's the solution? And I'm just always like, it's decentralization, folks. Like, you want to own your own property? Like, this is the best way to do it. Like, just, remember to hold your keys. Remember to learn how to use this and safely and protect yourself. And, not your keys, not your coins,
Another angle, so Shishi came up with this, or at least he's who I heard it from, but it's like the question he likes to ask people is, like, basically walk them through, okay, it's like, we know, Google owns your data, Facebook owns your data, like, it's just kind of fucked. Like, if you could self-host your data, that would be better, right? I get people to understand, like, okay, yeah, like, me controlling my data is better than Facebook controlling my data. And it's like, that's a pretty simple concept for people to understand, even if they have no interest in actually getting the hardware to do that. You can at least kind of see the value for it. So then the question he asks people is, well, don't you want some self-hosted money too? And it's like just this idea of like, no, you can't, like, you know how it's actually kind of hard to self-host your data. You know, maybe you don't want to give up Facebook. That's right, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine, whatever. Like with money, you can do just a little bit. You know, like maybe you just self-host a little bit of your money, and then the rest of it is still in the bank or whatever. It's, you know, just self-host a little bit of it and see how it goes, as an angle to kind of get people started.
Yeah.
I think that's good. And I definitely like, I think 2 years ago, I started on the mission that you're talking about of going out and trying to sell everybody on Bitcoin. And what I found is a lot of people really aren't interested in taking responsibility for their lives and, you know, doing things that are, they might deem as difficult and hard. And so I, like, Skeef introduced me to this idea, but like when I lead, when somebody asks me about Bitcoin, I initially start with probably the most anarchist thing I could think of at the moment. And if they respond and are like, yeah, I'm not really digging it or interested, I just don't put a ton of time and effort into that conversation. Because I personally don't really see a huge benefit to people that, you know, go and they buy GBTC or, you know, buy a little bit of Bitcoin on Coinbase. You know, if they're not willing to, you know, take the time to self-custody and eventually get to looking at taking their privacy seriously with Bitcoin, it's really not doing a ton different from them than, you know, going and picking good stocks or, you know, whatever else is the deal. And so that's the attitude. I might have, you know, become a little bit jaded over the past year, but what I've seen is when I do that, people end up coming back around. This Canada thing that's happening with people shutting down bank accounts has been really interesting because there's family members that have thought that I was a complete nutcase for the last, you know, year and a half around Bitcoin that haven't looked at it and are now, you know, messaging me this week like, hey, I'm stockpiling food, I'm stockpiling guns and bullets, teach me about Bitcoin, you know, because I'm interested in it.
David Heinemeier Hansen was a big example of that recently. He's a guy, I mean, he's from Denmark, he's total left wing, all that kind of stuff, but he built a really, really big framework for like building web apps and stuff. Like in the technical world, he's somebody I've read for well over a decade. He's really, really smart on lots of different stuff. But that was basically, he's been anti-Bitcoin for a very long time. Like he's been talking shit about how it's a Silicon Valley wet dream, you know, since like 2013, something like that. And he posted, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people saw it, but he posted a blog post about Canada, you know, not totally walking back his position, but way more than I had expected. And yeah, I think a lot of people are realizing that.
Yeah, I mean, I call it waking up, you know, because I had to wake up personally, you know, and I had to start waking my family and friends up to like kind of the world we live in, because personally, like I've just been living through like, you know, like I've always been kind of jaded and I've always like sensed like some sort of corruption in my life that like I just couldn't put my finger on, you know, and then ever since I dug deep into like macroeconomics and started understanding what is money, and like really, I guess I have the pandemic to thank for it, because that's when I started like researching and digging deep. Because if it wasn't for that, I would probably still be, you know, just living my life like a zombie, you know. And it's so nice to finally like have hope for life again, you know, in the sense that like this world has a chance to really be positive and really allow people to like live their life through their passion and not just like the 9-to-5 daily grind that like many people around the world are facing, you know?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think like the most powerful tool like in reaching people is showing them the freedom that you experience. Like I think that is ultimately what's going to be powerful, because you can tell people like this is legitimately Plato's allegory of the cave that we're dealing with. Like what we were talking about earlier, as far as people just, you know, being stuck in this status mentality of not realizing that not subjecting your kids to abusive school structures and strangers that don't care for them, or, you know, subjecting yourself to this system that just loves to, you know, steal from you, and worshiping people that, you know, do not care about you whatsoever and would kill you in a heartbeat if you got in the way of their aspirations. Like, people are stuck in this mentality, and it's difficult for them to get out. And, you know, when you exemplify, like, I am not living in the cave anymore, and I'm enjoying this world outside of it, and, you know, what's coming is pretty terrible. Like, what we're going to see food shortages. We're going to see, you know, complete economic breakdown. I mean, what we're seeing right now is absolutely horrendous with the inflation rates, and people are getting wrecked. And as you achieve stability in your life, you know, people are going to be attracted to that. And I think Bitcoin is a great vehicle to escape what's coming. But
yeah, and showing people a righteous anger too, I think is important, because it's like just today at the grocery store, I went to the grocery store with somebody, and they had a shirt that said something about being angry, and the cashier, you know, she's checking out, she's like, oh, I should wear that shirt to, you know, I should be wearing that shirt after I saw gas prices today, and like made a little joke. And then she made some other comment. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was basically like, I realized, like, holy shit, like, this lady who, you know, probably makes $17 an hour, her gas bill just went up $150 after her food bill has probably been going up 75, 100, whatever bucks per month. And it's like, she's sitting there working, thinking, where the fuck is this money supposed to come from? Like, do I have a tree in my backyard growing this shit? Like, where is this supposed to come from? And it's like, they're, to me, like, people that don't have a righteous anger towards like some random person who's just trying to do their thing, getting totally just bent over and fucked by the state, by all these people. And it's like, you know, like, if somebody doesn't have a righteous anger to that, I don't have a lot in common with that person.
Dude, if you're not angry right now, there's something wrong with you. Like, I saw this debate on Twitter last month. People were saying, you know, if a man gets angry, he's not a real man. I totally disagree with that. Like, there are two different kinds of anger, and the first one, so that's petty anger, which is just getting mad at something stupid that doesn't really matter. But righteous anger is like a very important emotion that, you know, men have been emasculated to suppress, and these are just very abnormal times. And if you're just trying to be normal, then, you know, you're not getting it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, exactly what you guys are saying, like, people are angry, you know, people are angry and upset. It's just a lot of times, unfortunately, like, we're just jaded, like I said, like I was, you know, and like, I finally have the hope because I have Bitcoin, you know, like, and that's kind of why I'm on Twitter Spaces, honestly, is because, like, now I'm at a point where, like, I feel like I want to, like, try to give back and like help as many other people kind of wake up to, like, the beauty that Bitcoin is. And interestingly enough, to, like, the point you guys made earlier, like, every Bitcoiner I've met, like, literally, they're basically like homesteaders also at heart, you know, and it's so beautiful. It's so interesting because, like, we're all thinking, like, you know, 10, 20 years ahead, and we're always like, we're like planning for the worst but hoping for the best type of thing, you know, because, like, it could be just like a utopia, but it could also be like, you know, God forbid, like, something worse, you know, and, like, hopefully it doesn't go worse, and hopefully it can get better. But I feel like if we don't, each individual here that is a Bitcoiner, if we don't, like, really just spread the good word, then we're kind of, like, not helping the people that just don't know any better, you know? And, like, honestly, like, it was hard for me to find Bitcoin. You know, the only reason I found Bitcoin is because I started researching gold, because when the pandemic hit, I was like, you know, my family and I were trying to save for a house, and now we can't even afford a house because now houses literally doubled in our area. It's like overnight, basically, you know, like, the market was hot as is, and now the market's even hotter, and, like, people are overpaying by 100,000, 200,000 on a property. It's like, holy crap, like, good fucking luck, you know, like, so now it was like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do with this down payment? You know, like 3.5%, but still, like, you know, it was money that we saved up for years, and now we're screwed. what do I do? Okay, so I look in gold and it's all fake. Like the paper gold, it's like 13, 14 times leverage. So like even if you're buying gold, you're never going to get your hands on it, and it's fake, just as the money is, it's all fake. So it's like, then I finally found Bitcoin, and I remember hearing about it back in like 2013 or 2012, whatever it was, because of the Silk Road. And like because of the Silk Road, it had that negative like association with it, so I stayed away from it then. And then in 2017, I heard about it, but by then I was just so like deep into my like like basically brainwashing, and like all I heard was blockchain, and I was like, what the hell is blockchain? I don't get that, so I didn't look into it. And then like the pandemic hit, and then it was like, it's better late than never, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge barrier. People think they're too late. And I mean, that's the cool thing about Bitcoin is it's designed in a way that you're never going to be too late, because it's like the only real Bitcoin price is infinity, So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I want to
push back a
bit. I just wanted to push back a bit on the idea of like not, talking about Bitcoin with people who may not get it. Like, I get the idea. I get the idea, because the idea is that we want people who hold Bitcoin to be believers in freedom and believers in the values that Bitcoin is built upon. But I just don't see it that way. Like I'm if Bill Gates bought billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin tomorrow, I mean, obviously I don't like Bill Gates, but I just think if we really want to see this thing used as money, we have to accept the fact that people we hate are going to be using it. And there are already people that we don't like at all using it. Elon Musk is a total billionaire sham who's no different from Bill Gates. He just has a different PR campaign. That's the case. And he's got billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin.
Yeah. And I think I 100% agree with that anybody can buy it, and tons of people I hate will continue to buy it and use it. For me, it's like an energy allocation question of, and I also have a hypothesis that, the success rate is roughly the same of, whether you take a, more of a broad, call it Dan Hild style approach, or an anarchist tirade approach of, my general hypothesis, which could be total nonsense and isn't really even testable, would be that roughly the same number of people with either approach, or not even the same number, but the same individuals come out of either way, or anything in between as, quote unquote sovereign Bitcoiners who self-custody and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I don't know, but I do, like when I'm framing it, like I do make a conscious effort to frame it in a way that, is repulsive to status and is super unattractive and, oh, gross, why would I touch that? And, maybe I fail and that person is, morally equivalent to Bill Gates and they end up buying some, and it's like, man, it is what it is. But, I would like them to be a lot later for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We want like the freedom-loving people to be early, but at the same time, it's also really funny to see people who totally like indirectly do, basically indirectly they are harmed by Bitcoin and their current lifestyle, but they have the financial incentive to buy it because they want to make money. So like one thing I mentioned is when I was in the Marine Corps, during the 2017 bubble, like 25% of my platoon owned Bitcoin. And I remember thinking at the time that this is hilarious because it literally will defund us, and still people just want to buy it, and they don't give two shits about Austrian economics either, So, but at the same time, that being said, like there are people who were normies or NPCs or whatever, and then they buy Bitcoin because they want to make money, and then they actually start looking into Bitcoin. And at least they get orange pilled and realize that central banking is a scam. At least they get that. But
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it's gonna convert so many minds to be healthier minds. Like I always felt that corruption, and I just didn't know how to get out, and I just didn't know the solution until I finally learned about Bitcoin. Personally, I'm just talking about personally, but I feel like I'm not the only one, and I feel like once people are introduced to it, and even if they don't get it the first time or the second time or the third time, eventually once they actually dive deep and like understand and go down the rabbit hole, even just a little bit, the further you go into the rabbit hole, the more you understand,
Yeah. One of the funny things I've found is that normies a lot of times are a lot more receptive to this stuff. And I think like my goal with Bitcoin is to be fully transparent of what it is, what we're trying to accomplish here, and routing around central banking and routing around third parties and the implications of that in the long term. And a lot of times normies are pretty interested in that compared to, people that claim to be liberty minded, have read Rothbard, have read Mises. And like, I don't think that's, necessarily a prerequisite. It's just, and you're right, as far as like a lot of times Bitcoin is that kind of entrance into freedom and self-liberation. That's really exciting for people. But there is the hopeless case.
Yeah, for me, it's just so much fun because like it immediately helps you just not have boring small talk about things that don't matter. Like,
Exactly.
Bitcoin's an interesting thing to talk about, and it's like a total Trojan horse to red pill people. I love it.
It kind of just strips away that political correctness and just gets back to the fundamentals of life. Like everything is about the fundamentals of life.
Yeah.
And just to speak about like institutions real quick, and I'm sorry, like I don't know, is this like a podcast? Because I was not trying to like come in here and like.
No, you're good. No, it's
Okay.
discussion is so it's a weekly. Every Monday night we host it, and it's live streamed on YouTube.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
As well. But yeah,
I didn't realize. I just stumbled upon you guys randomly. Sorry.
No.
But I'm glad I did, and I actually just invited like my whole friend list that I've like kind of like T-Bone, Reef, like shout out to all you guys coming in now. Like,
yeah, and if any of you guys want on stage, just put out a request. We'll bring you up.
Yeah, they're cool people. They have a lot of good stuff to say. But just like about the institutions, right? Like personally, like I just, and I might be completely wrong to say this even, but I'm just like not super excited about the institutions. And like kind of to your point about like people buying GBTC and like the ETF coming up, like I really almost feel like it could be like a curse in a way, like a trickery of like the institutions, and like they're already here. I feel like because I'm just watching like the number go up, and like I'm like researching like the blockchain and like trying to like understand like on-chain analytics and stuff, and I'm seeing the money movement, and it just seems like they're already here. Unfortunately, they probably have been here, just kind of on the down low. But like I'd rather like all the normal people like just struggling every day, like just try to use this as their savings account, because the other thing is like, I don't really ever plan on selling. Like, I don't think it's a good idea. Like people like come into it thinking it's like an investment or something, but it's really a lot more than that. It's like just freedom, like you're basically exiting the system of corruption and entering the system of freedom, which like, I feel like every human on earth is all about freedom. And it's just a matter of helping them understand that this is what this is. And we finally have a way out.
Yeah,
Man, I wish every human. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I was just saying, and it's a as far as like selling, like not selling, like it's what I always go back to is like this is a technology to enable human thriving. Or human flourishing, however you want to call it. Like at the end of the day, I think that's what it is, and it's it's like I a while ago I was talking to somebody and he's talking about, he's like, yeah, I'm gonna sell some sats, blah 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 blah, but it turns out what he was selling, like he and his wife and his kids had been renting an apartment for years, and he was selling some sats so that they could buy a house and like have a yard, like all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, that's fucking tremendous. I love that idea. Like I love that you're doing that. Like that, it's not like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I view that method as like a giant success.
No, that is an amazing success. And I hope that my family and I and millions of other people, billions of other people have the same experience. You're absolutely right. I love the way you said it. Can you say it again? Like, what is it? Like Bitcoin is about thriving?
yeah, just like the end goal, in my mind is human thriving, human flourishing. Like
Absolutely.
it's important because it's a critical tool in achieving
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, and the other thing is, sorry, go ahead.
No, last thing I was going to say is I think it's very easy, and I'm probably biased because I got caught up in this. Like initially when I first found Bitcoin, it's like my perspective was like, this is, like Bitcoin is the end. And it's like, what I, changed my mind pretty quickly to is it's like, no, it's a means to an end. It's, the end goal is a bunch of sovereign, thriving humans, creating whatever life they want to create. Whether I happen to agree with it or not is totally irrelevant, but just these free sovereign humans creating the life that they want to create. That's the end goal. And it's like Bitcoin's important because it's a critical tool for enabling that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that brings me like to the point of like, money is the root of all evil. That's not true. It's not that money is the root of all evil. It's that the love of money is the root of all evil. So really all money is, to me personally, is just a means to an end. Exactly like you said. So that end is thriving. So it makes perfect sense. And to that same point, like, I feel like we're just entering this Bitcoin renaissance, like just like we've had other renaissances in history, like this is it. Like finally people are going to be able to follow their passions and live their lives passionately and with like fervor to do, what actually is really deep inside them. And they're not going to be like going to work and dreading waking up Monday and all that crap that like a lot of people are struggling with now. And like also like all these people who quit their jobs, like maybe it's because they finally realize the work they're doing is, and they're getting paid in fake money doesn't make sense, So hopefully they'll come to this, and I'd rather they come to this than like some like shit coins that are just trying to like completely scam them,
I think Andrew.
Yeah, Hal Finney has a really. What's up?
Oh, I was just gonna say. I thought you had something to say.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, Hal Finney has a really good quote that he liked. He says, "The computer can be used as a tool to liberate and protect people rather than to control them." And that's just one of my favorite quotes as far as Bitcoin, because it's just neutral. Like money is an inanimate object. It's a form of human technology with a purpose of just transferring and storing value. That's what money is. It's not, bad. It's not inherently evil or anything like that. It's just the way we use it. It's the same argument as, guns aren't bad. It's just people who use the guns. Same thing. But, I mean, in that regard too, like, I also don't think that, I think Bitcoin benefits everybody. And I also think that it also benefits the elite in some ways. And in that point, like, it has to kind of benefit the parasites a little bit in order for them to not go after it too hard. You know what I mean? Because they also have where to store wealth. Like BlackRock is just buying a ton of real estate. Like they've inflated equities so much, where you have these zombie corporations that are, stocks are going up a lot, real estate's going up a lot. Like literally everybody in these parasites that we're up against have the same issue of, where do I store my value? So, that's just kind of a concept that I like to entertain a lot too. Like, does it, are they just going to let a bunch of libertarians buy this freedom money and then like not get screwed over by inflation and just have great lives and just have this renaissance? Is that something that they're really want to let happen? And what is their incentive to let that happen if they're going to let it happen?
Yeah, we've had a lot of talks about ESG on the show, and something kind of came to mind for me last week. And as you're bringing up the institutions getting into Bitcoin, I mean, ultimately, like, what Bitcoin does is it actually brings free markets into existence. Like, we've really never had free markets. We've had this concept of one, and the ESG movement is going to fail because there's no real market for it. It's just a market created distortion of some maniacal idiots out there that want to control everybody using this corporate social credit system. And, they'll try and, implement these things into Bitcoin, but it's kind of like running a race and shooting yourself in the foot, because what is happening simultaneously is that people have the ability to opt out of this stupid system that they're trying to corral everybody into. And we're seeing that. Like, that's what happened in Canada, which was a big wake-up call for people. There's like this system that they can censor and shut down and confiscate. And a lot of people realized, oh, there's a way out for me, and as these energy prices go up and as food prices go up and as things get crazy, you're going to see people exiting the system and becoming freer and freer, and at the end of the day, what really matters is individuals' ability to produce value, and realizing that Bitcoin is the value that they want to receive for what they're producing versus shitty fiat or, whatever else. And I think that's, the real game changer that will really help people going forward is, a lot of people focus a lot on that's essentially what you're doing when you're going to the exchanges and buying Bitcoin, is you're transferring the value that you're creating into Bitcoin. But the problem with that is the value that you're creating is being distorted over and over again as those inflation rates go up and your paycheck's not following it. And so you're essentially getting less and less Bitcoin over time with that mentality. And so the idea of how do I earn Bitcoin directly, I think is really interesting.
Yeah. To that point, I just want to point something out. I mean, with the institutions buying up masses, I guess they'll have to pay their employees at some point with Bitcoin, so that makes sense, so hopefully that wealth will eventually transfer over to the people. But also to the previous point you guys made about people stuck in these really crappy jobs getting paid nothing while inflation is just going rampant, I'm personally dealing with that right now, and it's it's not like I'm getting offers oh yeah, by the way, here's even yearly raise, you got to fight for it. And it's tough to fight for it because then it's we're in a weird place in economy where it's yeah, you'll fight for it and they'll say no. And then, canned, and then good luck finding something better, so it's you kind of can't. And I feel that's another reason a lot of people, at least in the States, are just quitting and just finding something that pays them better right there. That's kind of how they're getting their raises. So I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't talk about. Obviously they're not going to talk about it on the news. I don't even listen to the news anymore because it's all fake. But people just even in the macroeconomic situation, they don't in a global bigger picture people, they don't even really think. I feel I don't even know if they think about that. It's oh wait, maybe all these people are quitting because their jobs don't pay them enough and their bosses don't even offer to help them during this time of crazy inflation. Anyone, and even my boss, when I kind of hinted at it nicely, I was hey, yeah, because he brought it up. Oh yeah, inflation is just whatever, it'll go away, it's no big deal. And I was well, no, it's actually a lot more than 7%. They're lying, it doesn't make sense. The numbers are skewed. And he's oh no, I was just on this meeting with a bunch of big shot, investment guys and institutions, and they're saying it's just transitory. It's no big deal. It's yeah, of course you're going to say that, But then at the same time, you're complaining to us, telling us how your costs are rising, and therefore you have to rise the cost of your products. It's it doesn't. It's they're just living in such a disconnect.
And I think there's an angle too. So Crisis BTC had an article last year sometime called "Why the Yuppie Elite Miss Bitcoin," and it's my main takeaway from it was just this idea that it's people who have lived their entire life benefiting from the system as it is just it's so difficult for them to see what's wrong with it. So it's if you're if the existing system, I mean Jordan Peterson in a lot of ways I think is is somebody who suffers from this phenomenon, because it's like he seems to have gotten just completely blindsided by the vaccine and all that kind of stuff. Like he as far as best I can tell, had no concept of this potentially being malicious or a bad idea or something like that. And he's somebody who, even with everything he's gone through, has been served very, very, very well by the existing system, and has, spent all that time in academia. And it's just, I think it's very, very difficult for somebody who's been served well by the existing paradigm to realize that paradigm is just completely and irreparably fucked beyond recognition.
Yeah, 100% on that. Yeah, that was a huge surprise to see that he got the injection there. I mean, it's just so, I don't know. I mean, I used to really like Jordan Peterson. I read his book. Like, he's definitely, he has a lot of good things to say, but I think he's too bombastic. And I think the fact that he got this vaccine was just a huge surprise.
I mean, it's definitely true that people that benefit from the system and that, are either A, benefiting, or are either just so stuck, and it's really hard to get those people out, because I'm talking to a lot of my family and friends, and it's hard because, a lot of them are still, going through a lot of tough times, and, thank God I'm blessed to where I don't have to worry about, this week, next week, but, if it's more than that, it could be tougher, so, everyone is in their different stage of life, and we have to be respectful of that, I think, and we have to try to just that's why I'm my mission now is just trying to help everyone just get on. And when I say everyone, I mean anyone that I meet,
And I've found a really good book that I like to give people is the Little Bitcoin book, because it's a lot of people aren't ready to commit, the Bitcoin Standard or something like that. But the Little Bitcoin book is, I don't know, maybe 120 pages. Jimmy Song and those guys, I think, did a fantastic job hitting the main points. And it's it has a chapter on all the big questions, and to me it's pretty accessible. But I hand out that book like crazy. I've given them a lot of money, and I'm very happy about that.
Never heard of that book. I'll check it out right now. Thanks.
Yeah, I just suggested that one to a family member this week that reached out. I was like, what the heck's going on? But yeah, people are about to get railroaded pretty hard. Andrew, you had a interesting tweet that we talked about on the show a couple weeks ago about the Canadian truckers. I forget what it was exactly, but it was essentially, correct me if my paraphrase is wrong, but they're essentially falling for a psyop in this situation. Kind of curious what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, so I want to start off with this. I'll preface it with this. I think 99% of the people involved in that are, great, genuine people who just want freedom, who are tired of, having a boot on their neck for the past 2 years, especially in Canada. So, the sentiment, I really feel for that. That being said, and I'm open to being wrong too, and I also can't verify this, right? I'm just a dude on Twitter, speaking my mind. But, whenever I see mass amounts of people all doing one thing in a very short amount of time, I'm going to ask questions about that. And I don't see, objectively looking at this, I don't see how a bunch of truckers, going to certain areas and honking horns and all that. I don't see how that actually helps the situation. The only thing that I actually think will help the situation is just outright disobedience to all of this COVID nonsense in every way possible. Just, non-compliance. I also think they want us to protest. And, somebody could easily disagree with me and say, okay, well, if they want us to protest, then why do they send all these cops there to just beat the crap out of people who are protesting? Well, I think that's just a form of protesting they want you to do. They don't want you to protest in other ways, like, having local food sources, like in the U.S. government. It's illegal to buy raw milk in many different forms in many different places in the United States. I believe it is still federally illegal, but I mean, states have their own laws. But anyways, I'm kind of getting off the point here. Maybe an important thing to kind of end on too is, like, social movements are almost always co-opted in some way. And, people who hear me say this can call me a conspiracy theorist and think I'm just totally nuts. But the reality is that governments have a huge interest in winning the hearts and minds of their citizens, as long as it's profitable to do so, as long as they have a financial incentive to do that. So, like the hippie movement got co-opted. Originally, I mean, that was largely just an anti-war movement, and the CIA got involved, started putting a bunch of people, making them famous, introduced LSD. So there are many like social movements which have been co-opted by the state. And for something like the truckers, like, to me, I see it as such a convenient excuse for the Canadian government to use more force on its people. And what is the ultimate, like, how do they know they win at protests? Like, they expect to just have a bunch of trucks in a certain area and then knock a lot in the street and think the government's just going to give freedom. Like, is that really what people think? You think a totalitarian government, right, which has literally destroyed people's lives for the past 2 years for the flu, is going to just give you your freedoms back after protests like that? They're not. The reality is they have more guns than you, and governments are not afraid to use them. That's the reality. So, and again, I'm open to being wrong. I look at it just like it's the January 6th event, but in Canada. And that's my point. I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, I totally co-sign that. Yeah, and that's something we've talked about on here a good bit. Is it's like what they want. Like, to your point about the protest, it's like what, and they being the state power, whatever you want to call it. But it's like what they want is people in place where outside where they can be identified. And it's like that's what I'm. Anytime I see a big group of people getting together, like, I assume there's some sort of instigation there, because it's like, they want, I mean, think about how much data they gathered on people who are, who would align with, the goals of like this trucker protest, things like that. Like they got all the data on everyone that donated. They've got names, addresses, bank account information. Even if they got, it sounds like they got some pushback from actually shutting down bank accounts, and they slowed that down. But it's like they collected so much data, and it's like on all these things, it's like they're trying to identify people. Or every time another social media app comes out, everybody and their dog joins it and basically says, "Hey, I'm exactly the person you're trying to identify. Here's all my information by signing up for, Parler or, whatever the latest one was." And it's just, I don't know. I would like to see us, just Bitcoiners in general, be a lot more cautious about getting involved in anything like that. Like, today I was telling somebody, the first time I saw one of those Hong Kong coddle tweets, I was like, nope, not touching this. I'm not even going to retweet it. I'm not going to like a tweet. And it's like not out of cowardly, I'm scared of the state, or what if they come after me? But just from an angle of this is not how we win. Like, doing stuff publicly, tracking addresses, like, oh, here's where the funds are. Like, that's not how we win. Like, we win by, embodying the cypherpunk ethos and using leverage and like understanding where we have, giant comparative advantages.
Yeah, I think we both were in agreement with you on that, Andrew, and it's kind of the same stuff that is happening in Ukraine right now. It's it's just poor tactics at the end of the day. And Ben Stone outlines this in Sedition, Subversion, Sabotage about how, you know, the goal ultimately is to undermine the legitimacy of the state in the minds of people. And protesting is a form of civil disobedience in trying to influence the state, which is driving state legitimacy at the end of the day. And so it is, you know, a complete waste of time and poor tactics. But yeah, I mean, the state accomplished a lot. Not only did they get to track everybody, in Australia, they got to shoot people full of microwaves and probably give them cancer, all the undesirables.
Yeah, they're already doing that. I mean, that's kind of a side tangent. Like, frequencies are a very good weapon to use on people because it's invisible. Like, you can't see it. But for anybody that just doesn't think that frequencies affect the human body, I mean, they totally do. There are, you know, a lot, like there's the rice machine, RIFE, which actually shatters cancer cells. And this is like real stuff, studied by, you know, scientist type people. And I mean, it's the opposite as well. Like Fergie Towers, women who are pregnant, who live near Fergie Towers have a 50% increased risk of having a miscarriage. So yeah, the frequency thing is the big thing they use, but on the higher level point, as far as protesting, like going back to what I was saying earlier, this is the thing that we really need to be thinking about is, yeah, because I mean, they want you to go out in the street, have a sign, yell all day, and then go home, and then your life is the same. Like nothing changed. But, you know, the most effective forms of protesting are orange filling your community, right? And then finding local food sources. Like raw milk is a rabbit hole that I've really been diving into, like told against family farms in the United States. I think it was in the 70s, from the 70s until now, we've had like 80% or maybe 90% now of family farms go away from them. I mean, that's just insane because they're not able to maintain expenses. It makes more sense just to sell. And big corporate monopolies are just gaining more and more power on the food supply. And it's just crazy, man. Like, it's just crazy seeing videos of these poor families who are just selling some milk to people in their community, raw milk. And then, you know, they get raided. Like a SWAT team, you know, of 20 guys with big guns shows up to their house middle of the night, no knock raid, just because they're selling some raw milk. It's just insane. Like they don't want you to be able to just go to the farm and buy some food salt. They want you to be going to the grocery store, putting on a mask, and do it. You know, buying food from this huge company that they're working with. That's what they want. So,
and it comes from one facility where they can introduce whatever they want, you know, and put, you know, all kinds of chemicals, all that bullshit. Like, thankfully, in Arizona, we're lucky. There's raw milk at almost every farmer's market in the state. But there's I know there's a lot of states that's not the case.
How much are you paying for raw milk?
$12 a gallon is what I pay.
Damn, $12. I'm paying $3.50 a gallon in Mexico.
Wow.
Yeah, man. It's yeah.
So I have a question for you guys. You know, it's funny you guys bring up basically kind of homesteading, you know, because that's what we're looking to do. And like, I feel like every Bitcoiner I talk to is into homesteading, whether they're doing it or looking to do it or whatever, you know. So I'm just curious, like, you know, say like homesteading in the U.S., like, isn't there kind of like that issue with like the whole like eminent domain and with like the whole like property tax issue and kind of all that? Like, how do you guys think about that?
I mean, you can't eat sats, right? Like the end goal is to have us unnecessarily be happy, as we all know. And sure, I mean, that is the downside to owning land and having resources that, because of their physical nature, they can be taken from you in a much more easy way than Bitcoin can be, because that's just 24 words in your head, you know? But, yeah, like I just think if you're not actively trying to get land yourself or make connections with people who do have land and food and resources, then you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah, right. And those things you mentioned are definitely risk. It's, to me, like, this is, I have an ongoing fun little Twitter fight with the people that live in Texas. And it's like I joke around, but it's like my basic argument to them is that, like, I don't give a shit who wins elections. Like, I care about the baseline culture of an area. And it's like, to me, that states like Arizona and Wyoming, South Dakota, do, like, Arizona could get a Democratic governor next time around. They could go for Hillary Clinton next year. None of that matters to me. Like, what I care about, like, and what I mean by, like, the baseline cultures, it's like, I really like living in a place with a ton of people who want to be left alone and who just don't want to be bothered. That's had, constitutional carry for 15 years now or whatever it's been. And it's just like, there's plenty of stuff wrong with it. There's still, the state sucks. It controls way more of my life than I would like to. But I can find a lot of, it's like when I'm looking at buying real estate, I'm not so much concerned about prices. Like, I'm concerned about being near people who, will kill communists if the need arises. Like, that's, to me, like, that's what's important about a location.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's why I wouldn't want to leave America, because my country, I've been here.
Yeah, the way I would think about it too is, like, I own guns, and the state owns nukes, and they own drones, and they have SWAT trucks, and they've got a bunch of people that will happily shoot me. But it's the process of making it more difficult. And I think, like, ultimately, to homestead, you want a little bit of land. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it's not always easy to do it in the city. Like, if you live in Tucson city limits, you're not allowed to have roosters. And
oh my God.
And there's limits on, livestock and stuff you have. And so, generally it's advantageous to move out of the cities where it's a lot more difficult to control you. There's less population density. And yeah, I mean, I think just ultimately the lifestyle makes it more expensive for the state. And, like, because I own firearms, I'm able to defend myself and not have to rely on criminals with badges who have no interest in protecting me to protect me.
Right.
Because
I think the big thing too is like really thinking through, like, what do I need? What am I out? Like, so, like, let's say, wherever you live now, let's say, both sets of your kids' grandparents are within 30 minutes, that could be California, and there's a very low chance, you might move out of that situation. And so it's like, what I think through is, it's like, okay, like, state by state, but also, what are my options? And it's like, one example I think of is, Tucson is comparatively very democratic to the rest of the state. Pima County that it's in has about 1 million people. Like, it's, it's pretty big, kind of urban area, whatever. But right next to that is a county called Cochise County that essentially nuked their entire, we were talking about this last week, but, like, essentially nuked their entire building department a while ago and said, hey, if you buy land and you want to put a house on it, like, nobody gives a fuck. There's people living in shipping containers. There's people living in tents. There's people building earth ships. It's like just a couple weeks ago, or last week at the farmer's market, I was talking to a guy who, he and some other people are building earth ships out in this county because it's like, it's desert land nobody gives a fuck about. You can buy an acre for, like, $800 or something like that, and then just start putting stuff on. And so it's like there. So it's like that. You've got Tucson, the urban county. It's way better. It's way better than anywhere in California, but it still has a lot of downsides, just being, a moderate city, that kind of thing. But it's like right next to there is, freedom country, and they're, it could be 20 minutes away. So that's anyway. That's something I try to think through.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what are my deal breakers? What's nearby? What are my options? Are there are there things I can do to create material improvements that are accessible?
Right.
Yeah, and you could live in rural California, and that'd be a much better situation than Miami, Florida.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's also about like population density, right?
Yeah, it's just a lot easier to control a bunch of people when they're in a certain area, and you have like every single exit point of that area mapped out and centralized. So yeah, people are just nicer too outside of the city. They're just more human. Like it's just such an unnatural way to live life in this, around a bunch of concrete.
Right. Concrete jungle,
Yeah, dude. I do not like that. I'm from LA, and I would not want to live there in a million years.
Yeah. And just another big thing I keep thinking about, and that kind of worries me. So like most of us in the States, like we started off buying, KYC because that's kind of all we know and kind of easiest for beginners. So like now with like, kind of taking it to the next level and like things like Samurai and, Whirlpool and things, like it's like, is that the right way, and like, and then there's like a question of like, okay, so you do that, and then, now you're like on a list, like, we were talking about earlier. So it's like, there's so much like OPSEC concern and just like, do you guys have anything you would like recommend people about that?
We both unmuted. Steve, you want to go first?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so two angles to it, right? KYC, non-KYC. I think what personally I think is best is to have a KYC stack and a no KYC stack, which basically everybody has, because like you mentioned, when you first start buying Bitcoin, it's 9 times out of 10, it's going to be through probably like Coinbase or something, There should also be a day, like Bitcoin can't be censored, but centralized companies are regulated. Like that's the reality. There could be a day when, let's say, you have like hundreds of thousands of dollars Bitcoin, and you want to buy a house with it, and you want to sell it. That exchange asks the source of funds of how you got that Bitcoin. So like arguments can be made on both sides. That's why I say I think
exactly.
So
exactly, yeah. I mean, that's exactly my concern, because I don't want to like do something and then now get tainted and then now like be stuck if I ever do need to use it like to thrive, like we spoke about earlier, But at the same time, like I also want my privacy, and I didn't realize in the beginning that there's just like so much to learn, like just to be careful and to be smart about it, So like there's even tons of people that I know that think they own Bitcoin when like they bought it on like, for example, like let's say a Robinhood or some crap like that at first, like, and like, yeah, I heard that like, yeah, now they're like trying to like help people like exit it out, but still like, there's like so much paper Bitcoin out there too that's getting sold that's not like real Bitcoin. Like I always tell people, if you can't hold it yourself on a cold storage, if you can't take ownership of it yourself, then you can't be self-sovereign, and that's kind of the whole point of Bitcoin. And I get that there's going to be tons of people in the population that just don't want to take that step. But I feel like it's just an evolution that people need to take, and it's just a matter of them educating themselves and understanding it better. Because in the beginning, like nobody wants to like, fix their car and like change their tire or whatever. But at the end of the day, like eventually once you, get a flat tire on the side of the road and you don't know how to do it and you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, you're going to realize, hey, I should have freaking learned how to do this. So, that's kind of how I see it. What do you guys think on that?
Yeah, I think for me, like the way I kind of approach it is it's like goal number 1 is for people to have sats in self-custody. in my mind, that's priority number one. And it's like once I get that established, with somebody I care about or somebody I'm talking to or whatever, then I'll move on, because it's like, yeah, like it's, just sharing ways, it's like, networking with people, because there are a lot of people who are Bitcoin retired or who are Bitcoin miners who, need to sell to live or sell to buy electricity or whatever. And so it's like, that method kind of takes some work, but it's like once a person has that network in place, there's no reason to buy KYC. But I always if I'm orange on somebody, I like to keep a little bit of stats on my phone so that I can sell it to them right there in their first stats, or hopefully without KYC, and then kind of teach them how to use different things.
I forgot who taught me this, but somebody told me that they just have I forget, either their own Lightning node or something like that, and they just send people 1,000 or 2,000 sats, just to kind of get them started, just to get them understanding it.
Yeah.
And on CoinJoin, I think it's like the way I kind of think about it is it's like, understand what do you want out of Bitcoin. So me personally, I'm virtually 100% CoinJoined, and if down the road, and I've just, after all this time, have just come to the position of, I never want to, it's really important to me to, once money goes into Bitcoin, it's in Bitcoin, and that's the new world. It's like I landed on South America and I just burnt the ship behind me. It's like so for me, it's really important to me that it's like that's my general thinking on Bitcoin.
And that's kind of what my point was earlier about, I don't ever want to sell. I would trade it, for goods and services, because that's going to be, hopefully the new economy of the world, a more fair and free market system, but not for dirty fake money. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that too, because it's it very well, it's entirely possible, that a couple of years down the road, I won't have access to a lot of the Bitcoin companies because, I refuse to play those games. That's a trade-off I'm happy to make. And if somebody else comes along and says, no, I take the other side of that trade-off, I say, okay, Bitcoin is fuck you money, which means if anybody tells you how to use it, you tell them fuck you. And so it's just, I try to get people to really think through the different trade-offs and then make a decision based on that. And if their decision is different than mine, then, it is what it is. It's not anything I get worked up about.
And I think there's also the aspect of you being in this chat with us is going to nuke your social credit score. Because I know the three of us probably have a pretty bad one, based on the things we say online and probably the content we consume too. I mean, there's this whole aspect of the surveillance world outside of Bitcoin even that's going to be, very difficult to operate in unless you comply with the system. It's just exactly like we've seen in the past year. If you refuse to wear a mask and if you refuse to get vaccinated, your life became very, very difficult very quickly. And so, there's the aspect of just kind of framing in a different way, of Bitcoin will allow you to operate outside of that system and can be used infinitely better and more privately than any other, alternative out there, except for, maybe cash, which is getting eliminated. And I mean, it's just, there's these fun practices that you can start with, buying things online. How do I buy things online without leaking as much personal data as possible? How do I get it shipped to, a PO box or friend's house or, something like that without doxing my address, doing things like that and kind of incrementally moving into the privacy world?
Yeah, absolutely. And I found that there's tons of literature about how to do this, and there's tons of really great resources and books. So I am going to look into it, because I definitely believe in privacy. And it's nuts that we were basically raised in kind of into a mentality of you don't need privacy, but at the same time, I feel our parents totally appreciate privacy if they understood the OPSEC issue of it.
Yeah, I mean, the way I like to, bring it up with people is helping them to understand how individual privacy is tied in very closely with property rights and your ability to own private or property in the first place. And the elimination of privacy in general is looking for, more and more ways to extract from you. And I feel like that's a pretty good starting point with people like that.
Yeah, totally. So like I just recently found out about Bisque, and so I haven't tried it yet, but I've heard good things. So yeah, I'm gonna definitely check out Bisque.
Yeah, and I think like this is where like the local level becomes very powerful too. When you start transacting in a circular economy and seeking for ways that you can use Bitcoin in your interactions with people versus thinking just like, oh man, I can't, spend it at the grocery store. I can't, send it to the exchange or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey T-Bone, hey Reef, what's up guys? Do you guys want to come up and say hello?
I invited those guys, so they're free. You can jump on up.
So I think we should, we're about hour 36 in. We should start diving into conspiracy theories and weird stuff. So, Skeef, you said you really wanted Hillary Clinton versus Trump 2024. You want to expand on that?
Yes, I just think it would be. I wouldn't say I want that because just of how much human misery would be involved with all that. But it's like, to me, like Hillary versus Trump all over again, which is, I don't know. It would be to me like the most clear example I can think of just, I don't know, how much of a ridiculous sham this whole thing is, because just of how tired and awful it was the first time around. And then for a whole bunch of people to realize, wait, those are our two options all over again. And I don't follow politics, so I don't know how likely it is. I assume because she's an absolute psychopath that if she thinks she has a 1% chance of getting in, that she'll run again. But that's more my hatred of her as a human than an informed political perspective. One theory, though, Andrew, I'd be curious to see if you've come across this or what you think. It's something I've been reading about lately, is this idea. So everybody knows China has these big ghost cities. They've got, you can look up YouTube videos of just empty apartment buildings, 100 stories tall, just rows and rows and rows of them. So they've got these completely abandoned ghost cities. And the traditional narrative, because everybody's known about this for years, is that this is the product of a real estate bubble. And so it's like China's got this big debt bubble, which they do. That part's definitely true. And so the idea is it's like they've got, these are just, it's just, excess in the real estate market, debt fueled nonsense, is the traditional explanation. And it's like another explanation that I've been reading about recently is this idea that it's like they're pre-building all of these big giant smart cities for when they need to consolidate dissidents, and not just China, but that like this is some sort of international, I don't know if World Economic Forum's the right group to tie in, but it's like that kind of idea that it's like these aren't debt fueled ghost cities. These are part of the Great Reset, and these are places where they're going to want to coercively relocate masses and masses of people. Like I said, not just within China but around the world. I don't know if anybody has come across that, or if that seems remotely plausible or like a giant pile of nonsense to anybody.
I have not. I have not seen that. I see a bunch of weird stuff coming from China, though. Yeah, I don't know if I have an opinion on that. But, I mean, here's the thing. Like, if America is a very difficult country to, take over using force. Like, yeah, the government has nukes. They have enough nukes to completely eviscerate Earth like 27 times, literally. So, yeah, they have more firepower, but at the same time, it's a very well-armed population. So I'm not so I'm not so sure it's going to be this thing where they just send in like a bunch of guys and there are these standoffs, everything's so violent like that. I feel like the more efficient way to trip America is supply, which they're already doing. So I don't know. I don't know what China's going to be doing with all those buildings or what.
That's a pretty interesting theory. I've never heard that.
Yeah, I just feel like it's the path for the parasites. Like they can so easily cripple the United States just by destroying the food compared to some sort of physical confrontation. But I don't know, man. There's the upside. There's the fake aliens. We'll see that one. There's a lot of excited. I don't know if you guys
Pandemic.
Yeah, you seen that fake alien invasion stuff?
Oh yeah.
I have heard something about that. And something also about how they're going to take the internet down. Do you guys want to touch on that?
Cyber pandemic.
Yeah, right. That's why I wrote that article that I pinned in my profile about can Bitcoin survive an apocalypse? Because I've had that concern. So they had Cyber Polygon, which was basically this big training exercise that had a bunch of NGOs and governmental representatives, World Economic Forum, people like that, pretty much do this training exercise for some sort of a cyber pandemic. If there was a shut off, they talk about. They have this video about Cyber Polygon on the World Economic Forum's website, but they basically talk about disconnecting every single device from the internet for 24 hours, something like that, which would really change a lot of things. So,
well, and one angle I've heard, like proposed reason that they might, because a lot of people ask, well, why would they shut down the internet? Like, what's the end goal? And it's like one potential explanation, that I've seen is that it's like the idea is once they feel like the digital ID stuff is in place and workable, that it's like the internet gets shut down and then the digital ID is how you get back on it. Because it's like without some kind of big event like that, the question is, well, how do we migrate people in mass to this new, way of identifying?
That could also be a way for them to airdrop the CBDC,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another angle. I was talking to somebody recently. It's like in my opinion, CBDCs should be approached in the same way. Like they should be treated like those smallpox blankets that, those terrorists that were working for the federal government all throughout the 1800s were given out to Native Americans and everything like that. Like they literally put smallpox on blankets and just committed a genocide. And it's like I don't know. I think something like that is how we should view CBDCs. It's like not as like, oh, it's this free gift of, and I'm sure I can use it without, actually getting roped in. Like me personally, I won't accept any of it. I won't participate. I won't use it to buy more sats. Like I don't want to even put a toe in that system. Like I think the people running that have, at least decades, maybe centuries of experience using that stuff to slowly co-opt people. I mean, it's like, you look at the history of Native Americans. Like why did some tribes hold out into the 1800s and why did some not? And it's like a lot of it was the decision point of how to approach reservations and when to go on. Somebody like Crazy Horse, who had a very, very deep understanding of the power dynamic and what was at play. And he's somebody who was very clear. And he said, he had this position. He's like, when we fight other tribes, it's a war of honor, and we might kill them, they might kill us, but it's an honorable. Like he viewed it as this honorable endeavor. And like he said, when we fight the white man, it's about stacking bodies. That's all there is to it. And it's like, his basic point was, it's like, we need to kill as many of them as possible to have a prayer. And I in my opinion, he was 100% correct. And it's like, but it's like he understood that power dynamic, and a lot of other people did too, I think, at the time, but they viewed it as this just completely fundamentally evil entity that needs to be opposed and interacted with, just as little as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
that's definitely going to be the high road to take and the honorable approach. So, yeah, much respect.
I think it's also extremely selfish. Like, I think the people that don't take that approach, I think, are going to deeply, deeply regret it and find themselves like, oh fuck, I thought I saw how they were going to get me, and I totally missed it. And I think CBDC is going to be a giant way that they get their hooks in and really start to control people.
Yeah, the way I've imagined it is, like a bail-in happening, and then when that bail-in happens, that's when like the internet could go down, and then that's when they could just say, oh, by the way, like now we're gonna, do this digital ID, CBDC, and then welcome to the new world,
Yeah.
Yeah, they need a good excuse to do that, though. I saw this article from Fox News that came out blaming some, I guess, apparently some Russian hackers corrupted the systems of some U.S., energy facilities, something like that. But like this Russian hacker narrative, and then with the escalating conflict in, Russia and the Ukraine, I can picture that as a very good excuse for some sort of infrastructure failout event that they can then use for saying, okay, now we need to basically KYC people who want to use the internet to make sure you're not a terrorist. So I don't know. That's going to be a difficult one to get around. So, but I also definitely think that long term they need the internet to control us. I don't think there's going to be this scenario where they just do like a big blackout and then we just can't go online. Maybe. I mean, I can picture them doing it like a day or two, something like that, to really freak people out and get them all scared.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because think about it, the chaos that'll happen. People would just go on the streets and all the crime that would happen during that time period.
Lots of Gucci bags would get
stolen. That's the thing too. Is Bitcoin. Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin fixes pretty much everything on a long enough time scale. But short term, the reality is that it's not going to fix everything right now, and you can't eat sats. But what you can do if you want to use it to improve freedom in your life is to use it to fight inflation and, connect with like-minded Bitcoiners. So that's a huge aspect of Bitcoin. Why I think we love Bitcoin so much is the network that's in it, because all of us are just seeing what's happening right now with how fucked up this world is getting, and we're all trying to do what we can to prepare for it. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't, Bitcoin is not going to fix everything right now, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, Skeef and I went back and forth on this. I think he believes it more than I'm bought into, but some days I wake up and feel like what we're watching right now is an intentional dismantling of society, and all the thing, like the US dollar kind of ending as the world reserve currency, the monetary system falling apart, energy prices going up, the food supply getting destroyed, is all very intentional and calculated. And ultimately what they need to do to, we saw this happen with 9/11. We saw it happen, in 2020 with COVID. They just need to scare the shit out of people, and then people will just kind of do whatever and go along with it. And that's what I would expect to happen, in the future. It would be very, very scary for the average person to lose internet for an extended period of time, and then for it to come back online, them point fingers at this person's at fault, or this group's at fault, this invisible enemy's at fault, and here's the steps we're going to take to prevent this from happening again. They could accomplish a lot doing stuff like that.
Yeah, just real quick, speaking of losing internet, I might heading into a dead spot. But just want to thank you guys so much for letting me on and speaking to you guys. It's been a pleasure. Nice meeting you all. I hope I see you guys around. Take care.
Likewise. Yeah, thank you for joining in. It was awesome.
Thanks for
And
dropping.
Francine, did you have a question, comment, anything like that? I saw you raise your hand. Totally fine if not. I just wanted to give you an opportunity.
Yeah, hi. I'm kind of new to all this, but my interest was first when you talked about China and all their ghost buildings, and I've done a little bit of reading on it, and I've never just been watching China over the last 20 years or so. I've never seen them do something without having a plan, an ultimate goal in mind. And right now they have a real problem in their society with people who own all these empty cities. Anybody with any wealth in time pretty much has bought apartments or homes in these cities. So they're facing a little bit of a crisis from what we can see, but it makes me wonder because China has been pretty good about having a long-term plan. And I wondered what anybody thought about that. Thanks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think they do. Yeah, that seems to be. I'm certainly far from a China expert, but from my kind of outside perspective, it does look like they make intentional kind of long-term moves that are at least have a goal, whether or not that comes to fruition or not. But yeah, I would largely agree with that.
China. Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, I don't know. Central planning is such a flawed structure or way to organize a society, and it inevitably fails. And so this is like the hard part is like, are they evil genius masterminds, or did they make a massive blunder and the gig is coming to an end? And I tend to believe like central planning always fails, and I think the Chinese economy is even more fragile than the U.S. economy, just based on the fact of just how even more manipulated it is than ours. So,
and to be clear, I think China's beyond fucked. Like I think they're a house of cards that's like already on fire, and like whatever debt problems the U.S. has seem to be peanuts compared to China. But it's that theory is just something I've been reading about the last couple of weeks. Like just like this idea that like that's a potential explanation for these ghost cities, which definitely exists.
is this InfoWars? Where are you getting this from?
It was actually started as an episode on Sam Tripoli's podcast, which is called Tinfoil Hat. Fantastic podcast if anybody's looking for something to listen to.
Andrew, did you have any more thoughts on alien invasion?
Yeah, well, they always like to float out, their goals. They always like to kind of tell us what they plan on doing. At least that's my opinion. And yeah, I mean, a bunch of people in positions have kind of floated this idea out there. Like that's how we would get the whole world to unite, right? If there was some sort of fake alien invasion, or if there was some sort of alien invasion, they don't say fake alien invasion. I mean, like I really have not dived down that much on that, but I find it interesting. I mean, Ronald Reagan talked about it. I think the Pope has even talked about it. Like, it's something that's and like NASA is part of the government, and like I don't know what everybody's opinion is on that organization. It was definitely founded by a bunch of Nazis, and I don't know if everybody here believes in moon landing, but my opinion, I don't trust the government, and that includes every branch of the government. I don't discriminate. So, yeah, because nobody really wants the one world government. You think about it, normies don't even want a one government, right? I mean, that would be just such a good way for them to do it. So, who knows? We'll see. There's so many things, man. There's so many. Like it's easy to just waste your time too much and look into the stuff too much. I mean, there's the fake alien invasion. There's what's the other one? Grand solar minimum, which is some people say that there's going to be this huge cooling phase where much of the United States is frozen. So many different rabbit holes that you could go down, but we ultimately don't know. So.
Moon landing's fake. That's my comment. Fake as fuck.
Thank you. Super fake.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty, if you just think about it from logical standpoint of the technology that they supposedly were able to get to the moon with compared to the technology that we have today, and how much less expensive and more convenient it would be to get there, and yet we just don't do it on a regular basis.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Well, we went back and forth on this one too, on whether we've never really done a ton of space exploration like they purport to, like the moon landing just not being a thing, or are we far more advanced than they're telling us?
Yeah, maybe this is for another time. I just don't believe anything NASA says. I don't.
Yeah, I don't think we could possibly be far more advanced than what we think, because otherwise NASA wouldn't have egg on their face from Elon's self-landing rockets.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that, but if you really want to get into it, that could be part of the trope of making NASA. NASA is like what we see, but there's all of this dark black projects that exist that we don't have any clue of what's going on, and so it could be just this PR campaign convincing people that all of this stuff is happening. I mean, when you get into the aliens and stuff like that, and cattle mutilations, there's a potential a majority of the UFOs that have been seen, and these cattle mutilations are being it's people witnessing government crafts.
Yeah, that would make a lot more sense to me. I definitely don't think that humanity is at peak level intelligence right now, just because we have iPhones in our pockets and technology and this awesome technology. I don't think human beings are at their best right now. I think intelligence has actually been, decreasing.
I also am an ancient civilization adherent.
Have you looked into the mud flood before?
Oh yeah.
Oh
no. One of my hyper Bitcoinization dreams to buy one of those buildings that was half buried in mud, and there's just so many implications of it. The idea that San Francisco was actually built 400 or 500 years ago, most of it not in 1870 or whatever the traditional gold mining narrative is.
Yeah, dude, that is the most fascinating rabbit hole. Or, I mean, one of them, mud flood, that just basically takes everything we were taught about history, completely turns it upside down. And and it makes sense too, because you'll have these old buildings in the United States, and pretty much the narrative that we're given when we're kids in history class by teachers who are just, going to college and giving this information, and but like we're told that a bunch of settlers just showed up and made these huge buildings, and these buildings are found all over the world, and they all have they all kind of look the same, right? They've got domes, they've got that Greco-Roman style. Anyways, it's like here in Mexico too, you'll just see these super huge old cathedrals, and like just to like the story we're told about that is just the Spanish came over here, killed a bunch of people, and then randomly built up these huge churches, which I have no idea how they would do something like that, in that time period when they're on a horse and buggy. So yeah, history is definitely a huge lie, in my opinion.
That's the tagline for that is, if you think the news is fake, imagine how bad history is.
Yeah, exactly. Like the idea that these buildings were actually not used for just religious purposes, and they actually had some sort of technological purpose is just totally mind-blowing. Yeah.
What's the name of that rabbit hole?
The mud flood.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's really worth looking into. Super.
And a really good podcast on all this stuff is called The Higher Side Chat. There's a guy named Greg Carlwood who does, it's like I personally, I love Alex Jones. I grew up in Texas. I like the guy. But Greg Carlwood, he's very measured, very thorough. Like he's a fantastic interviewer, and he does a really good job of bringing people on and then helping them get their ideas out there, as opposed to, I think he does a really good job of like helping people to present their ideas in the best way possible. And so, in my opinion, it's a good podcast to listen to, and then think, oh yeah, I found this part compelling, or oh no, that's obviously complete nonsense. I don't know. I think his is a good podcast for navigating that.
Yeah. Zorn in the chat is shilling Hollow Earth theory.
Oh yeah, Greg Carlwood. He's a big fan of.
Yeah, he's saying The Coming Race, a novel by Edward Bulwer Lytton. Ancient civilization's super, super interesting. I think we have very limited understanding of the ancient world, and it's pretty obvious. I mean, if you look at just like even recent history, the Incans had a very sophisticated way to record knowledge and communicate an alternative to writing. They would have these beads that they would form into bracelets to record information that we have no idea or concept of how to read. And you just build off of there of what the potential is. Theories about Atlantis are interesting to me too.
Well, that's the mud flood theory, is that Atlantis was not this one place in a specific area that just got put underwater, but that there was this almost worldwide civilization called Tartaria. And I guess Tartaria, was like its own respective civilization. They had flag the early 1800s, and you can see a Tartarian flag, right? And then you go on old maps and you see Tartaria, and it's just this huge piece of, this huge civilization, and we're just not taught about them. And all this stuff is really tough because, again, it's you can't verify it yourself, but that's kind of the idea, is that they much more advanced than us. They had these buildings like everywhere, right? Like North America, Asia, India, Rome, literally the same kind of architecture, and they all have dome-shaped buildings. But yeah, it's a huge rabbit hole.
Yeah, that stuff's fun to get into. Well, kind of wrapping up. We just rolled over 2 hours. You got anything to shill, Andrew?
Yeah, man. I mean, freedom's my priority in life, and I work full time at Bitcoin Reserve. We help buy and sell Bitcoin. So doing that. I also have a podcast. I'm going to be more active now. I've been super busy traveling and stuff, but yeah, I've got a podcast called Exit Plan. I'm also an ambassador with Free Private City, so interested in that idea. Definitely check out Free Private City concept that could basically turn governments into private companies in a way, and they would just give us the same quote services we get, but in a more private manner that doesn't rely on trusted people. So that's basically what I'm doing. Yeah.
Nice. All I have to say, if you're not listening to Andrew's podcast and paying attention, you're missing out. Huge fan.
Appreciate it, brother.
It's honestly been a little bit since I've listened to it, but I need to go back and get into it. I think the last episode I listened to that you did was talking about using Bitcoin with mesh networks. So that was a while back.
Yeah, that stuff's really cool. Yeah, I'll be posting one from Satoshi Sound, who's the producer of that Bitcoin show, Bitcoin and Friends. So that'll be coming up this week.
I love that show.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. I definitely appreciate you having me on. It's fun talking with all this stuff, and man, you guys make me feel sane. Not the only one. So looking forward to seeing you all at the next con.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I just want to
thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
sure.
And I just want to give a big shout out to, we haven't done this for a while, but to our sponsor, Dirtbags Bar, that makes this show possible. They are the best place to find your future ex-wife, and absolutely fantastic place.
Nice.
It's a real bar in Tucson, and so yeah, we made them our original fake sponsor. We've since had other, like a few weeks ago we were really fortunate to have a joint venture between Pfizer and the Ethereum Foundation sponsor us called Synthetic Wombs, and so that was really exciting. We were able to give our listeners a discount on their first synthetic womb, so that was pretty cool to be able to do that.
Yeah. Should I play the Bill Gates sponsorship real quick?
Oh yeah.
I've got that one saved.
Toxic Airwaves is brought to you by the Gates Foundation. The Gates Foundation is proud to sponsor Toxic Airwaves in recognition of the work they have done to promote gender equality in the Bitcoin space. We at Toxic Airwaves are supremely grateful for this recognition of all our hard work to support diversity and inclusion. This grant will be applied to 2 goals. First, we will be using part of the funds to hire additional non-binary listeners until they compose at least 50% of our audience. Second, we will be funding a partnership with Drag Queen Story Hour by donating 500 copies of the Bitcoin Standard to combat mental illness. We are eternally grateful for the support of our sponsors and the commitment to social justice, because without social justice, it's just us.
That's pretty funny. That's pretty good.
Yeah, we have the best sponsors out there. Very great.
Yeah, dude. They sponsor everybody else. They sponsor our games. Yeah, it's good to hear that you finally got yours.
Yeah. Well,
all right, guys.
Yeah, thanks for dropping in, Andrew.
Cool. Yeah, talk to you later. Peace.
Before I shut off the stream, just want to shout out Arizona Bitcoin Network is going to be meeting tomorrow up in Phoenix somewhere. I don't remember where it is, but that's going to be dope. And yeah, I think that's all I got. Big thank you to Andrew for coming on. Thanks to everybody on stage. Zorn, great to have you in the chat tonight. Yeah, have a good one.